My name's Heidi. I'm one of the keepers here that takes care of the penguins. And here we have Desiree and Bailey. They're also penguin keepers, so they're going to be doing a feeding. And while they do a feeding, I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about the penguins that we have here at the Toronto Zoo. Now, before I begin my talk, I'd like to remind everyone to please not throw any coins, objects, or food into the exhibit or into the pool. These birds are very sensitive birds, so anything that does get thrown in, especially small things, so you might think it's only a coin, or it's only a bobby pin, or it's only an elastic, it's not that big. Actually, the smaller things are the most dangerous things, because the penguins will actually swallow them, and this eventually it will kill them. So I can't stress enough how important it is to be aware of your surroundings, especially when you're looking into the exhibit, just to make sure that nothing falls into the pool. And of course, if you guys do see somebody intentionally throwing something into the pool, please let me know or a close staff member, and they will be escorted out of the exhibit. It's absolutely not tolerated. So with that being said, I'll talk to you guys a little bit about our penguins here. So here at the Toronto Zoo, we have 15 African penguins. We have 3 juveniles and 12 adults. So they're all out here now on display. The 2 juveniles, the ones next to the pelicans, they're out here actually for the first time today. So we're just kind of keeping an eye on them, but they seem to be doing quite all right. So they're hanging out together. And then once in a while, they'll hang out with Eldon, who's the oldest juvenile penguin, where I'm not quite sure where he is. And in this exhibit as well, we have 2 white-breasted cormorants here on the rocks. We have some pelicans, 2 different species. We have a great white pelican, that's the big guy, kind of in the middle. And then we have pink-backed pelicans, so those are the 3 other ones. Sometimes people get confused because one's a lot bigger and a lot whiter. They think that maybe that's the male, and then there's the other ones are the females, but they're actually all male. They're just 2 different species. And then we have Cape shell ducks, 2 pairs of Cape shell ducks. The brown ducks that you see, one's in the water, and the 3 other ones are probably around the exhibit somewhere. So these guys are from South Africa and Namibia and surrounding islands. So there's 17 different species of penguins. So these guys are the only species that actually live or inhabit the continent of Africa. So a lot of people sometimes are surprised to think that there's actually penguins in Africa, but in South Africa, and actually there are quite a few different species that live in temperate climates. So these are one of those species. So I'll talk to you guys a little bit about their adaptation. So African penguins, just like every other penguin, obviously don't fly, they swim. So they spend over 80% of their time in the water. So they have to be very well adapted to swimming in water. So the first thing, the most obvious thing that you'll notice, which every penguin has, is that tuxedo-like pattern, that black and white pattern. Now this plays a very important role for these guys, especially when they're in the water. So the black and white acts as a camouflage, or it's something else called countershading. So when these guys are swimming in the water, their coloration actually protects them from predators. So when they're swimming, if there's a predator that's chasing a penguin and they're below the penguin, they'll look up and they see the penguin's white belly, and that white belly actually blends in really well with the sky, so they're kind of well hidden. And if there's a predator on top looking down at the penguin, they'll see the penguin's black back, and this blends in with the ocean floor. So they're very well hidden underwater. Now that, with their speed, makes them for very, very good swimming ocean birds. So they swim around 7 kilometers an hour on a leisurely swim, but they can pick up speeds to up to 30 kilometers an hour. So something else that you'll notice is the shape of their body. So they kind of look like torpedoes or bullets. So this again helps them pick up speed in the water. So they use their flippers to pick up speed, and they use their feet to navigate left and right. Now something else about these guys that's extremely important, because they're water birds, and although they are from South Africa, those oceans are quite cold, they need to stay warm. So they use their feathers as insulation. Penguins have the most feathers out of any other bird on Earth, and it's mainly to help them stay warm. So their feathers are kind of just overlapping one another. And this, when they're in the water, the water can't penetrate through down to their core body, so they stay quite warm, or at least their core body temperature stays the same, so they can't get too cool. Now, because their feathers are so important, they need to take really good care of them. So what these guys do once a year is something called molting. So they molt once a year, which means they shed their feathers. So they lose all the feathers, every single feather on their body they lose, and they do this in a very short period of time. In a 3-week period, they'll lose all their feathers. So while they're doing this, they'll stay out of the water. So they won't go in the water because they know enough to know that if they go in the water with no feathers, they're going to freeze. So obviously if they don't go in the water, they're not going to be eating. So what these guys do right before they molt, so during the pre-molt, they pack on as much weight as possible. So they just eat as much fish as they can, and you'll see these guys, a few of them have already molted, they're like double the size. They're absolutely huge. So they use all that energy for that 3-week period while they're on land, and they're just kind of focused on regenerating their feathers. They'll just eat as much fish as possible. Then they'll go through that 3-week period, they'll lose all their feathers, and then once that 3-week period is over, they're back to their slim self. So if you do, by chance, this summer see a penguin kind of on shore that looks really scruffy, that looks fat, sometimes people might assume that there's something wrong with the penguin, that it's sick. He's not hanging out with all the other group. They're not sick. They do look pathetic, I'll admit that, but they're just going through a molt, and guaranteed in a couple weeks, if you come back, you'll see them, and they'll be exactly the same way as all the other penguins look. So these guys are unfortunately quite endangered. So there's early 1900s there was over 2 million, and now unfortunately there's less than 55,000. So for doing, they have a lot of hurdles in the wild. Mainly is oil pollution and overfishing. So we're basically taking away all their fish. So they're running out of fish to eat, out of fish to find for their chicks. So they'll go for less nutritious fish, which in turn makes for weaker penguins, penguins that can get sick a lot easier, that can get predated a lot faster. And then again, they need to feed their chicks, so they're out in the ocean trying to find food for their chicks, but they're gone for such a long period of time that by the time they come back, their chicks have been predated. So that's one of the reasons why their population is declining. And then, like I said, oil pollution. So these guys live in the ocean. They live in surrounding islands around South Africa and Namibia. Unfortunately, these are also the islands where these guys breed. And unfortunately, geographically, where they're situated is right in the middle of a superhighway where tankers and ships go by on a daily basis, and there's oil being spilled pretty much daily, whether it's intentional or not, right around their surroundings, right where they're breeding. So these guys are getting covered in oil. Once these guys get covered in oil, unfortunately there's not much that they can do to help themselves survive. Basically they perish. So either they try and clean themselves off, so they'll try and lick or ingest the oil to try and clean their feathers. So while they're doing that, like I said, they're ingesting the oil, so they die from toxic ingestion, or they starve to death. Because again, once their feathers are covered in oil, they know enough to know that their feathers are no longer waterproof. Once the oil hits their feathers, that's it. Those feathers are toast. They won't work anymore. And so they don't want to go in the water, so they stay on shore, and of course there's no fish on shore, so they end up starving to death. So this is probably number one of the biggest reasons why these guys, the population is declining so much. So we can do some things to help these guys. Here at the Toronto Zoo, the whole purpose of having penguins here at the Toronto Zoo, especially African penguins, is so that we can establish a breeding program, which we've done, and like I said, we have 3 new juveniles from this year. So because their population is so unstable in the wild, we want to try and have a stable population in captivity. So all our joint efforts with all the other zoos around North America, the ones that have African penguins as well, will trade penguins so that they can breed and reproduce, so that we can have a stable population here in captivity, so that all you guys can learn about these guys, about the way they survive, what they eat. So we just want to educate people. Unfortunately, there's a good chance that if things don't change, that in 10, 15 years from now, there will no longer be any African penguins in the wild. So the only way that you guys will really be able to learn about these guys is if you guys come to the zoo, like here at the Toronto Zoo, and we can educate you guys about these guys and their conservation, and just what we can all do to help. So one thing that we can all do to help, which sounds very simple, is if you just respect your environment, respect the oceans, the oceans for these guys is like air for us. If it's polluted, they're not going to survive. It's as simple as that. So we have to do our best to not pollute, reduce our carbon footprint, know what to recycle and what not to recycle. Even locally, I'm sure you've heard of birds getting caught in plastic or fishing lines. So same kind of thing. Just respect your environment, respect the ocean, and then you'll respect these guys, and they'll live a lot longer because of it. So something else here that we have at the Toronto Zoo, for those of you who enjoy eating seafood, we have something called a seafood guide, or seafood watch guide. So it's just a list of fish that lets you know which are sustainable and which aren't. So if you do want to eat fish, and next time you're going to the grocery store and you want to purchase fish, you can have this little guide with you to let you know what fish you should be buying and what fish you should be staying away from. And something else at the Toronto Zoo we have that can help these guys is something called Adopt an Animal. So if you guys are interested, for example, in adopting a penguin, you can do so, and the proceeds will go to penguin conservation. Now, if you're looking outside of the zoo and you want to learn more about these guys, there's a fantastic foundation called SANCOB, South African Foundation of Coastal Seabirds, and they're based in South Africa, and they rehabilitate penguins and other seabirds, and a lot of what they do is they actually de-oil penguins. So they go and grab the penguins that have been oiled in the ocean, bring them back, rehabilitate them. They literally brush off the oil with a toothbrush and soap, and then once they're all nice and clean, they'll put them right back out in the wild. So it's a lot of work that these guys do. They're non-profit. They do a fantastic job. So if you're interested in checking them out, you can check them out on their website at sancob.com. We also here at the Toronto Zoo send some money to them every year to support them. So with that being said, if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer anything that you guys have. I'll come around and just look around for a little bit. I can't really hear, if you guys shout questions at me from here, I won't be able to hear anything because of the filters that are going on. So I'll just come around and I'll have if anyone has any questions. And just to let you guys know what Desiree and Bailey have been doing, they've been feeding our penguins about 3 feeds a day. So they get fed drink when they smelt. They don't have a specific amount of food that they require. Basically, they eat as much as until they're full, and then they'll kind of walk away, and they might come back and have another second feeding. So it's basically all up to the individual penguin. You'll notice that Bailey she's actually marking down how much fish every penguin gets. So we do this for a couple of reasons. We hand feed our penguins, as you can see. So number one, these guys get vitamins and supplements every single day. So we want to make sure that each individual penguin actually gets their proper supplement. So that's one of the main reasons we hand feed the penguins. And secondly, if we were to throw a whole bunch of fish into the pool, there's a pretty good chance that not all the penguins would get their fair share. So there's some penguins that are faster, that are bigger, some that are a little bit more timid, actually prefer eating from the keeper's hand. So we want to make sure, again, that they all get their proper share of fish throughout the day. And then also, as you can see how close, these guys get really, really close to Desiree when she's feeding. There's some that are so friendly they'll actually jump on her lap while she's feeding. So this actually gives us a really, really good opportunity to take a look at our penguins and just give kind of like a physical exam, but not very invasive, so we don't have to catch them up. Having them this close to us, we can actually take a look at them. We can look at their beaks, we can look at their feet, their feathers, if there's any cuts or if there's anything going on, we'll be able to catch it early up and we can do something about it. So it's just a really, really good way of kind of keeping a visual inspection of each of our penguins. So I'm going to shut my mic off, and like I said, I'm going to come around and answer any questions. Like I mentioned, I did have some seafood guides. Is there anyone interested in having a seafood guide? Because I have to go back and grab some, so I just want to make sure. Yeah, there's a few. Okay, so I'll just head back in, grab some guides, and then I'll come around and answer any questions that anybody has. And if nobody has any questions, have a great day at the Toronto Zoo. Thank you. Oh, I saw my last show. Are you going to take pictures?